Hi guys, this is going to be a quick video lesson recapping 3.5, the non-specific defence system within the immunology unit. So let's start with the basics. Non-specific means that it's able to destroy any pathogen. And these pictures here are pathogens. A pathogen is defined as any disease-causing cell. So normally it's a bacteria, a virus, could be a fungus, but it causes disease. The pathogen entering the body is called infection. Disease refers to the damage done to the body by that pathogen. So the immune system is going to try and destroy the pathogens before they cause disease to the body. Now, the first way that this can happen is your physical defences. So this is a picture of some cells. The tightly bunched cells at the top are called epithelial cells, and they form a physical barrier. The epithelial cells are the lining of your skin, also the inner lining of your digestive system or your respiratory system. So they cause an actual physical barrier to prevent pathogens from infecting your inner body. You also get chemical defences. So these are chemical secretions that are produced by epithelial cells, and again, they destroy pathogens. So this could be tears, it could be saliva, it could be mucus, it could be stomach acid. For example, if you eat food covered in bacteria, you'd hope the stomach acid is going to destroy most of that bacteria before they can actually invade and infect the body and cause disease. So an inflammatory response is what happens when pathogens do enter the body. For example, if you cut your skin, you break the epithelial cells, you're making a gap in that physical barrier. This is a localized defense mechanism, so it only happens in that area. And that's why things like cuts look red and inflamed, because of inflammatory response. Now, the starting point is the mast cell, which is shown here. The mast cell is kind of like an alarm. When pathogens enter the body, it sends out a signal warning of the pathogen's presence. That signal is a chemical called histamine. So think about mast cells. Mast in a boat is where the lookout would be. So the mast cells act as lookouts. The lookouts are up high. So it's the chemical that starts with high that you associate with mast cell. So mast cells release histamine. Histamine causes two things: vasodilation of the blood vessels and for the capillaries to become more permeable. So in this picture, we can see close up, there's an injury at the top. To the left and to the right, there's these blue mast cells. The mast cells detect the pathogens, which are the little green dots at the injury, entering the body. The mast cells release this chemical called histamine. Now that histamine causes, first of all, vasodilation. So the arteries coming towards this area, if they vasodilate, they become wider. This increases blood flow to the area. But in this picture, we can't see the arteries. That blood vessel at the bottom, the walls are only one cell thick, so you should recognise that as being a capillary. So first of all, histamine increases blood flow to the area of infection due to vasodilation of the blood vessels. And then its second effect, it makes the capillary become more permeable. Now that means it's easier for cells to leave the blood through the capillary wall. And that's what's happening on the right with that phagocyte. That's a type of white blood cell that's squeezing through the wall of the capillary. The histamine is making that capillary wall more permeable. And then that phagocyte is going to engulf and destroy the pathogens. So that's the steps there, if you want to pause and read through these yourself. And this sums it up. So the first line of defense is our physical barriers, such as epithelial cells or the chemical secretions. The mast cell is a type of white blood cell which releases the histamine chemical. The histamine causes vasodilation of arteries and for the capillaries to become more permeable. Now be careful, you can't have vasodilation of capillaries and you can't have increased permeability of the artery. So make sure you have these two things separately associated. The vasodilation of blood vessels increases blood flow to the injured area. This causes the area to look red and to become swollen. Okay, so because of this vasodilation, there's increased blood flow. That means that more phagocytes and more clotting elements are going to accumulate at the site of infection. Equally, because the capillary is more permeable, it's easier for the clotting elements and phagocytes to leave the blood and move into the infected area where they accumulate, which means they build up. The phagocyte's job is to engulf and destroy the pathogens, and the clotting elements clot the blood to seal the injury to actually recreate the physical barrier again. Okay, so let's look at what a phagocyte is. This should be familiar to you from National 5 biology anyway. This is the type of cell that accumulates as a response to inflammatory response. Phagocytes are going to recognise pathogens and destroy them. And this is any pathogen, that's why it's called non-specific. So the way this works, you remember you don't say it eats, it engulfs the pathogen. Same as National 5, we're going to add a little bit of higher knowledge in red. So phagocytosis is the process of the phagocyte engulfing that pathogen. It then destroys the pathogen using digestive enzymes. Those digestive enzymes are stored in something called a lysosome. That's because if the digestive enzyme was just loose inside the phagocyte, it would be digesting the phagocyte. So it's stored in these organelles you need to know called lysosomes. Don't say things like it fights or combats pathogens, just engulfs and destroys. And this process on the left takes you through this. The bacteria is giving out a chemical, it's engulfed into the phagocyte, a vacuole forms around it, and then the lysosomes move towards that. They release the digestive enzymes into that vacuole, and the pathogen is destroyed. So what happens next? Well, one phagocyte can be expected to kill all the bacteria or pathogens. That would take too long. So the phagocytes also release a chemical. Again, they can't call for help, but they can signal for help. This chemical attracts other phagocytes to the area. Now, we said that histamine starts with HI for high and a mast cell's up high. This is like a call for help. So the cytokine's role is to attract other or more phagocytes to the area of infection. So think about call the young team, CYT, as the starting first three letters of this chemical that you need to memorise, as well as memorising the job that it does. Okay, so let's look at a question. Pause the screen now, answer these 4 marks, and when you're ready for the full answers, you can unpause. Okay, so one way in which these epithelial cells defend the body against pathogens. Now you could say they form a physical barrier, preventing the pathogens from entering the body. That describes it fine. You could also say they release chemical secretions, which can destroy pathogens. Name structure X. Now it's a blood vessel. It's not an artery or a vein because the walls are only 1 cell thick. So you should be able to identify X as being a capillary. Okay, B is about the chemical histamine. Name the cells that release histamine. So it starts with HI, up high. That is your mast cell. Okay, so the lookout is up high. The mast cell releases histamine. Explain why the skin around the puncture wound becomes red and swollen. Need a bit more detail here. It's about explaining, but this question is still about histamine. So histamine causes blood vessels to vasodilate or causes vasodilation of blood vessels. That's descriptive. Explain it. This increases blood flow to the area, so therefore the area becomes red and swollen. And that's us.